Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the Expert Insights titled DEI Now What? My name is Eric Dormo, and I'll be your host for today. This webinar is brought to you all by the Institute for Professional Development at Metro State University. Here at IPD, we deliver customized professional development for employers and individuals in areas such as business architecture, public sector supervision, diversity, equity, inclusion, and other leadership topics. As a reminder, today's webinar will be recorded and available on our website in the next coming weeks. Got some amazing panelists that we'll have today, so it'll be a little bit different format for expert insights, but I'll formally introduce them after I get through some of our IPD pieces here. So as you all know, we do customized training for organizations. And although the customized training is our bread and butter, here are some additional offerings from IPD. If you want to learn more about these offerings, please be sure to reach out after today's webinar. So again, thank you all for tuning in today. So as we go into some of the main content here, the creation of today's panel was inspired by recent events. As we all know and see, diversity, equity, and inclusion appears to be under attack, and there's a lot of scrutiny and things like that. And we've seen a variety of headlines, painting this grim picture of diversity, equity, and inclusion. With today's panel, I was hoping to reiterate the value of DEI in the workplace and for you all to come away with positive actions that you all can take for the continuation of diversity, equity, and inclusion in our workplaces. So that'll be the theme of today. And before we get into our main content here, just wanted to do a brief introduction for you all have not met me before. But again, I'll be today's moderator for the panel. My name is Eric Dormo Jr., and I'm currently the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Program Specialist with IPD. I'm originally from the Twin Cities, and I haven't left, so this is my home. My background is in higher education, where I gained experience in advising, career development, mentorship, and leadership training. As for my role within the Institute for Professional Development, I've given workshops on a variety of topics, such as multi-generational differences in the workplace, cultural humility, diversity, equity, inclusion essentials, building personal brands, and much more. So that'll be the lens that I typically come with when it comes to expert insights or trainings and things like that. But enough about myself. I just want to give a layout of how today's expert insights will go. We're going to do panelist introductions, and then we'll give some insight again on today's diversity, equity, inclusion, climate for context before going into our panel. So we'll have our panel discussion where I'll have moderated questions for our panelists, and then we'll go into an audience question and answer or Q&A. So there should be a Q&A function within Zoom. So as we go on through our presentation, through our panel today, feel free to submit some questions to into the Q&A box. And then once we get into the live Q&A, I'll read through some of those questions. If anyone feels comfortable, I can pull up participants to ask questions. Or otherwise, you can type those in into the Q&A function. So after our audience Q&A, then we will close out. I'll give a preview of what's coming in April. So again, love for y'all to stay engaged. If you have thoughts or any reactions, again, we have the chat function here. But please put in some content for the question and answer portion as we go through. So let's go into panelist introductions. So first we have Taneasha Muonio, and Taneasha is a good friend of mine. She is a health equity clinical consultant at Hennepin Healthcare, and I can read through her bio really quick. But Taneasha is a proud Minnesota native and a physician assistant certified, living that messed up the titles there. Taneasha has a diverse background encompassing medicine, and she's dedicated to encompassing medicine and advanced health equity. And she's been doing this for a long time and just really a true advocate. So I'm excited to have Taneasha on here. How are you doing, Taneasha?
Hey everyone, really happy to be here and talk about such an important and pertinent topic. Thanks for thinking of me, Eric.
Yes. Then next we have Shay Marlowe, who is a DEI training specialist at the Minnesota Child Welfare Training Academy. Actually met Shay at a conference at Metro State, and he's been doing some great work in the community. He's bringing a great amount of experience, coming from diversity recruitment and former chair of the Men of African Heritage Employee Resource Group at Minnesota DHS. And Shay is just truly dedicated to the work, just even from my interactions with him. So thank you for coming in, Shay. How are you doing today?
Hey, thanks so much for having me, Eric, and appreciate this opportunity.
Yes, indeed. So I appreciate that. And before we begin, let me just try to set the tone again of today's topic. So, as we all know, when we think about today's political climate surrounding diversity, equity, inclusion, a few major things stand out to myself. We are more polarized than ever as a nation, even when we think about defining what diversity, equity, and inclusion stands for. As you can see from some of these headlines here, there are many companies that are pulling away from their DEI efforts. And then on the opposite side, there's companies that are standing strong in their stances, right? So we see both sides of this, and there's also, companies that are figuring out, legal implications in today's political climate, sparking discussions on changing language surrounding DEI and specific workplace programs around recruitment, et cetera. And, people are, worried about positions, thinking about funding, and even just, their own safety within the workplace. So this kind of, this sets the tone. And just off the bat, Taneasha or Shay, just what are your initial thoughts, when you're thinking about today's political climate and just everything that's going on right now?
I mean, I feel like, in an effort to be a Southern gentleman, bringing out my Atlanta roots, I'd say I'd like Tanisha to go first, but since I'm already off mute, I guess I'll go this time. But Tanisha, you got the next one. Again, good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for having me today. Eric, the first thing that comes to my mind, just being leaning into my humanness is fear. Fear is always typically what comes to mind when people are met with change, because change can be scary. Many of us are unfamiliar with the territories we've never been exposed to, and to even individuals we've never been exposed to. So fear and or uncertainty are kind of usually the first things that come to my mind. But I personally am learning how to lean into that, because usually your best and deepest growth come from you leaning into your discomfort. So while fear and uncertainty are the things that come to my mind, I'm also learning that that is usually the beginning of my personal growth journey and learning.
I agree. As someone in this work, but also honoring the fact that I am a Black woman, and those intersections that I also hold walking through this world, and has led me to doing this work, and seeing this stuff, or this rhetoric and this fear mongering that is occurring, especially on such a political level that is super powerful. Definitely fear and anxiety. But then when I really ground myself, I'm thinking about how this feels new, but it's actually not. If you look at historical implications of progression, and when you have progression and folks fighting for equality, there's always going to be regression or attempts to regress the initiatives from the dominant culture or people holding power, right? So thinking about that, and for me, dismantling some of the fear that I have through understanding that this looks different, also with the impacts of social media, and we're consuming it on a different level. So then also limiting my social media consumption has helped me regain some of my peace and distance myself from fear. But I'm not going to lie and say that I don't have days where I'm thinking about going into work or doing this work, and not thinking about, am I going to have a job tomorrow, or am I going to be able to even say what I believe? And as someone who is operating in the medical institution, having to also grapple with the fact of, to me, health equity and medicine are synonymous. Like, they can't exist without each other. But unfortunately, not everyone operates or believes that, especially because medicine has been rooted in oppression. So just holding so many truths right now and trying to have grace for myself as I'm processing this within someone who is a equity consultant, but also someone, as Shay alluded to, that's a human and a woman of color.
Yeah, I think you all laid it out perfectly. We're trying to figure out just implications, what to believe or not. Thinking about roles and just how to show up. So I definitely hear you all and definitely can understand what you're going through. Um, so I appreciate you all just helping and setting the tone here. So now we will go into our panel discussion where I have a list of questions, but we'll let it flow how it goes and just indulge in rich conversation. So my first question is, how would you all define diversity, equity, and inclusion in today's political climate? Yeah, what would be your thoughts on that?
I'll go first, as Shay alluded to in the last question. But I think that's a really good point, because diversity, equity, and inclusion prior to this recent administration, I think, looked different, as we're finding out, in terms of the branding of it. But the work, truthfully, is the same. And as folks are seeing a lot of this propaganda and these federal regulations be passed down, diversity, equity, inclusion, truthfully, is, to me, everyone having what they need to live a fulfilled and healthy life, right? To be in alignment with their purpose, to have the basic Maslow's hierarchy of needs of food, shelter, people who love them, access to healthcare. And then once that's established, being able to reach self-actualization and what that means. So as folks are finding out who voted in a certain way, they're realizing that, oh, I use some of these resources that are actually diversity, equity, and inclusion, and it's not just racialized and polarized. And then they're kind of stuck, like, I voted against my own best interest because I allowed propaganda of what diversity, equity, and inclusion means, of it being about black and white and it being racialized. And now we're truthfully coming into a swing of understanding what diversity, equity, and inclusion means, in the way that it's kind of clearing out a lot of the chaos and the confusion. And people are realizing, like, oh no, I also need diversity, equity, and inclusion for my ability status, for my marriage, for the ability to navigate my world with disability services within my job, for FMLA, for like all these different things. So truthfully, I think this is one positive thing that's come out of this, is folks are, I think, coming into clarity and realizing diversity, equity, inclusion is not just about Black people versus white people, and dominant narratives can use that to maintain the status quo. So I think this is something that is going to push us towards understanding what diversity, equity, and inclusion really means.
And Shay?
Yeah. I'm gonna do some veggie backing here, off of some of the things that my fellow panelist Taneasha's already said. That diversity, equity, inclusion, it's been ever present. I will start there. I think that sometimes when we put certain labels on things, we think that it changes what that thing is or isn't. And I think reality just shows that from civil rights to women's rights to disability awareness and acceptance and the rights for those with disabilities or individuals with disabilities, like it's always been present. So again, from the diversity aspect, it's always, I think, been rooted in difference. How are we different? Leaning into more, dare I say, leaning away from focusing on the commonalities, but more so in like what makes us unique and who we are. as individuals. And the equity piece is the hardest one, I think, honestly, because really when you lean into like, what do individuals truly need, right? Just because Eric and I might identify as Black men don't necessarily we need the same things. And to that end, I think that that's where equity can be difficult. Even I love that Taneasha brought up being a Black woman, because that is important to keep in mind, that even though maybe all three of us identify as being Black, doesn't mean we need the same things or that we're from the same areas. So equity can be difficult. And I think that when we do talk about some polarizing topics like race, and usually always typically starts with Black and white races, there's that tough conversation about, well, what do white individuals need or prefer versus what Black individuals need and prefer, and that can come in complexities in itself. So to that end, equity, I think, is one of the bigger challenges for sure to sustain. And then inclusion. I say inclusion is the result. Do you feel included? Do you feel like you're a part of the conversation? Were you even invited to be a part of the conversation or the decision making? Or it was the result of said process? Does it benefit you? Does it neglect you? How does it make you feel? Inclusion, I dare say, is the result of the work that's being done. So I think, again, the mission continues.
I love
Yeah.
that, Shay. And something else I just want to add specifically about the inclusion piece is I think that folks will say DEI, but truthfully, we're just starting to even accept the D part and to like even be willing to grapple with the fact of like other narratives and experiences should be considered. And then with inclusion, it's like, can you show up still honoring professionalism? Because I think sometimes people will skew inclusion and say you can just show up however and it should be tolerated. But like, can you show up in a way that is honoring your job duties, but still being able to talk about what your family system looks like? Are you able to openly discuss the holidays that you celebrate? Are you able to talk about what you're doing this weekend and folks not putting their nose down at you? Are you able to talk about your lived experiences, your passions, your interests, or the resources that you might need within the workplace or as you're walking through this world in a way where it's celebrated, not tolerated? And that's a really core piece of my work, is trying to get folks to start to understand that inclusion is showing up as your full self and not having to assimilate or consistently code switch to be tolerated in the workplace, so that you're not running into experiences where you're feeling ostracized at the place that you spend most of your time, and is associated with your mental health, understanding that your job is tied to finances, and finances unfortunately is also tied to basic needs of survival, so everyone should be able to show up with peace. And that's really important to me within my work, especially as a Black woman in medicine.
Yeah, I think you all brought some really valid points, right? Thinking of the complexities of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and just some of the different experiences, right? There might be assumptions, based on, um, face value, or just, again, just what some people may see as commonalities, but there are so much differences. And T, even how Taneasha, sorry, how you related to the professional aspect of things, still showing that professionalism, but like you said, being able to show up as your full self, that's so important. Um, in your all's experience, how do you feel like today's climate has, influenced organizational DEI efforts? Whether that's through personal experience or just even what you all have gathered, right, from me speaking with colleagues, or yeah, just how things have shifted in your mind and you all's minds.
Eric, I just want to make sure I understood the question. Are you asking how have things shifted with DEI specifically for my work or our work?
Yeah, in today's climate, if anything has shifted or
Yeah,
influenced those organizational efforts.
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, I'll definitely start from the place of work, and we can get to the social side maybe later on in today's conversation. But from my professional settings, I would say nothing has changed yet. But that doesn't mean it won't change in the future. So again, as Eric mentioned, as part of my introduction, I do represent the state of Minnesota government. I am a part or within the Department of Children, Youth, and Families. It's one of the newer departments that was separated from the Department of Human Services, which was and possibly still is the largest state department with over like 500 employees within that branch of government for the state. So to that end, yeah, nothing has changed yet. We have a currently interim commissioner, Judy Harpstead was the commissioner of DHS, so they have an interim commissioner. Our commissioner for DCYF is Tiki Brown, and both Tiki Brown and the interim commissioner for DHS have both voiced support of DEI efforts going forward. To that end, what is always indicative of what may or may not happen in the future is funding. And right now, our funding is intact through end of June. July 1 is when the new fiscal year starts. That is when I foresee there being potential, not saying there will be, potential changes. What those changes will look like, whether it be name changes, the separation, dismantling of certain departments that are tied to DEI, to be determined. But I'd say that it's still very much like a sand type of box where it can shift. But right now, the desire is to maintain things as they are. So I'll stick with that. But yes, we are having open conversation of what the future could hold if change is required. But right now, we're holding strong that hopefully the future will be very similar, if not the same, to what it is today for our work. But we'll see how that goes.
I would echo a similar sentiment. Our institution does remain committed to health equity and diversity, equity, and inclusion, and what that means. And our health equity leaders also remain committed to that, and me within my own consulting. I am very committed to that within my medical practice. There's really no other option. And something that I try to remind myself of is it was truthfully not called DEI work openly until in Minnesota until after George Floyd was murdered, in terms of a holistic cultural shift, right? So before that, because I've been doing some semblance or branding of this work for about 11 years, and we're coming up on the 5th anniversary of his death, or his murder, excuse me. So then it looked like trauma-informed care, right? And you're just like, depending on the political environment, the branding of this work changes for me potentially, but the work really does remain the same. And I realized that me just showing up to work every day as a Black female PA and being able to be a clinician is a form of this work and representation. So I remain committed to this work regardless of who's in office. Now, in terms of our institution, we haven't had any changes thus far, similar to what Shay had alluded to, but we are a capitalistic society, and money really does change and influence a lot of things, especially when there's funding and governmental dollars. So I don't necessarily see the work changing, but I could foresee, if I had to speculate right now, what would come if this is not a hoax and just a bunch of fear mongering with all these crazy executive orders, all being intentionally pushed through at the same time to cause confusion, chaos, and overwhelm. That potentially name changes. It would maybe not say diversity, equity, and inclusion. It would say patient-centered care or trauma-informed care or community-centered care, et cetera, within my industry. But majority of our patients are people of color, and a significant amount are low income. We have a large immigrant population and folks that are not English speaking. So if we're going to deliver medical care for our patients is patient centered, we have an obligation to finding a way to continue the work, regardless of what the president or whoever's saying about the work.
Yeah. No, that totally makes sense, right? It's like where the work is still valid and important, and especially as we kind of controlling what we can. I remember having a conversation, I believe with Shay, and just thinking of, control what we can, and, having that validation from your organization, that's a key piece as well. Which leads me into my next question. Um, how should organizations approach, diversity, equity, and inclusion programs or initiatives when political climate shift, or especially when there are moments or movements to restrict DEI efforts in the workplaces. And then on top of that, are there any strategies that you all may implore or have experienced in, fostering that inclusivity despite external pressure?
Taneasha, do you want to start us with this one?
I don't have a strong preference, but I can. I got you. That's a good question. Now, I would say that it's definitely on a case by case basis, depending on what industry you're in. But for me, it's the the details of working things out is the complicated part. But at the end of the day, I think businesses, institutions, and individuals need to do a self inventory about like what are our values? Do we actually value this in practice, or was it something that we kind of just slapped on with all of the
Mhm.
black boxes on Instagram because we thought that this is what we were supposed to do because we felt bad, right?
Mhm.
And then we got caught up in this social justice movement through pressure. Because I also can say, like, there is pressure now to dismantle DEI. There was a significant amount of pressure to make sure your organization and your institution was promoting DEI, right? So
Mhm.
I would say first doing an inventory and having critical conversations with leaders of like, is this our actual values or is this our theoretical values? Because that's really going to change your positionality when you're gonna if you're gonna stand on business about this stuff, right? And for those who don't know, stand
Yeah.
on business is like put your money where your mouth is. Like when it comes time to some of these things coming down the pipeline, as you can see, like Costco decided to stand on business. Target, they're divesting from some of these intentional efforts as we're seeing, right? But once again, money talks because people not spending with these businesses is really reclaiming power and having folks think about like, oh wait, maybe this wasn't a good idea. But that also, and I can't speak for every business and institution, but from an optics perspective, it's really this movement is separating who are businesses that were connected to this work and it was a genuine part of like the foundation they were trying to cultivate within their business, and who was theoretical, right? And then so now once you do that self inventory, or as an individual, since I see like the participants are probably across so many different intersections, talking to your leader and then your leaders coming together and saying, where do we stand on this, right? And then secondly, getting informed. Like I had alluded to prior, I think the Trump administration, unfortunately, something they've done a great job at is fear mongering and causing chaos and the inability to parse through what's true and what's not, especially since so many of us live our lives not being fully knowledgeable of this process of laws and executive orders and bills. And I can even say for myself, I had such little knowledge prior to him coming into office. And now I feel like I'm constantly trying to learn, okay, so what's true, what's not true, what is an executive order, is an what can stop an executive order, and all of these different things. So getting informed about what's actually going on, and then truthfully picking I tell people, pick 3 things that are impactful for you and that you want to fight for, because with all of the chaos there's so many things to pick, because he's attacking people and the administration is attacking people from so many different intersections of identity that even for me as someone who's doing this work every day, I can't pick all of them. I literally do not have the human capacity to consume all of it. So picking 2 to 3 things that are really important to you and becoming in community with folks who have picked some other things, so that you guys are a well-rounded team and are staying up in the know about those specific topics. So first piece, figure out the values of your institution and yourself. Next, be informed and learn what's going on and picking things that are in alignment with you. And then thirdly, I think companies need to decide and maybe learn how to become creative with funding. Something I really appreciate and admire about the Twin Cities Pride organization is when they did a really good job at modeling crowdsourcing and community wealth. So they had seen Target's decision. They decided to say, no, we actually don't want your money since you're not in alignment. So we're going to decline it, and then we're going to crowdsource funding. And they ended up making even more money than they originally did from the original Target donation, or I don't know how that works necessarily in terms of what that amount of money is called or like how it is distributed. But I think becoming creative with, okay, if we know that this is the amount of money we have that's connected to federal funding, and we want to stand on business about this equity work because it's foundational to who we are as a company. We're willing to become creative or find other ways to move collectively and stay integritous in this work. But if it's theoretical from the beginning, creative crowdsourcing or finding other finances outside of the demonstrated or historical capital sourcing, you're not going to do. So I think it's just asking serious questions, having direct and honest conversations that are transparent, and becoming creative in this time.
Man, I would say that Taneasha dropped so many gems. I don't even know where I could squeeze in, but I'm gonna try. And Eric, I will be ready for that next question because I already see where we're going with this. But to that end, I agree. Going back to the standing on business thing, go back, keep the first things first. It's interesting that I'm a sports fan. For those who also might be sports fans on here, Anthony Edwards is in a commercial with Kevin Garnett, two obviously iconic Timberwolves players, and Kevin Garnett says, "Man, you got to stay out of the parties. You don't be letting all these fans be chasing you down." He goes, "Man, I don't even go out to parties." He's like, "I keep the first things first." And that just lets me know that, like, yeah, you always are going to be about what you're about. If you're about basketball, you're about basketball. If you're about diversity, equity, inclusion, that shouldn't really change, right? Now, maybe it will because to what we heard earlier, capitalism is a real thing. Money does change things. But to that end, I also would say, like, go back to what your mission statement is, go back to where your values are and reinforce those. Now, realistically, if you're maybe doing a little bit of a 180 from commitment to DEI. Maybe it's because it was never a part of your original intentions and goals in the first place. So when I hear about companies like the Targets and other organizations who are retreating, I'm like, well, maybe your business was never founded on those principles to begin with. So you use this as an opportunity to show how great you were or how recently committed you were, but it was only for you or your organization a fad. So I would just say, like, yeah, the retreat, in my opinion, is just showing true colors that these are organizations who are never really about the work to begin with. So the shift, I would say, is not so much of playing the game, but staying true to who you are and know what's important for your organization.
Yeah, I think a big theme I heard, right, was those organizational values. When you think about, you all mentioned, mission statements, value statements, and are the actions aligning, right? When you think about the actions that are being taken. Um, One thing that I pondered, kind of switching or looking more into like some of the legal aspects, right? How do you all see that playing out in terms of um, on the side of, people may be looking at some of the legal implications, or they may have that fear of being, targeted on a larger scale per se. Um, yeah, how do you all kind of see that aspect, right? Of like, can maybe it's being where it changes some of these namings or things of that nature, but and maybe they still have the intention of doing some of the work. Just what have you all seen or your thoughts on some of those aspects of all of this like backlash and everything going on?
Eric, I apologize. I just want to make sure I understand the question clearly. So I guess I want to paraphrase, when we hear, when we see these organizations and companies doing a bit of a shift, and some of them are getting right worthwhile backlash. What is that? What do we think? How are we feeling about it? Is that right, part of
Well,
it?
in terms of I think earlier setting up, how some of the legal aspects of things or people, um, because I feel like I've seen a lot of rhetoric, right, of okay, how do we prepare for some of the legal implications,
Mm,
or maybe it's the lack of knowledge on what can happen or what cannot happen. So
yeah,
kind of thinking of maybe for people that are organizations that might have that thought process,
yeah,
what would be thoughts on how they're navigating or just that aspect in general?
sure. I'll take this a little bit back to a couple of things that again I heard my fellow panelist Taneasha say, but also I've also been a student of as well, and that is that many individuals don't know their rights. they don't know what the laws are that protect
Mm,
them or even their families. Again, representing the Department of Children, Youth, and Families. Many families just don't know, like, hey, what are my rights if you're going to file a claim against me for neglecting or abusing my child? Well, what is, how do I combat that? Or how do I investigate that or get the full report? Or police are involved. How do I, right? So access to information is key, is so key. And what many people don't know is that you actually can get more information you think. Now, obviously, the internet is a great thing, right? So I know that's usually what people go to, their phones, their laptop. Oh, I got to pull it up. But sometimes even there's a reason why, many lawyers are willing to say, hey, I'll meet with you just to give you an insight maybe to what the case is that you're looking into or want to bring
mm,
about, and give you some, they don't necessarily give you a ton of advice because they obviously get paid for their time, but say, here's what you might want to consider doing, whether that lawyer is your lawyer, if they specialize in the law that you're pursuing or the type of case, or if they would recommend you to another law firm or specialist who knows background in that. So I just go back to, again, like, knowing your rights is super important. That said, I think that the current climate that we're in, what I heard Tanisha say earlier, knowing what an executive order is and how does that differ from a bill or a law, right, is
mm,
super important. Many
mm,
people don't know that when our current president and federal offices eliminated DEI programming, he eliminated it for federal funding, right? State funds and federal funds are two different pockets of money. So to that end, while federal programs may have some limitations now with DEI, doesn't necessarily mean state does. Now, is there some overlap? Absolutely. But to that end, it's also still knowing that when you're voting for a law to change, is that a federal law or is that a state law? So those are things that I think I would start with.
Yeah, that's a really great point. And even for myself, I had to learn the difference between federal and state funding, laws, bills, etc. So to co-sign what he had said, definitely getting educated about everything that's going on. But in terms of like the legal repercussions and how businesses are processing that, truthfully, I think institutions are acting prematurely. That's kind of a strong stance to take, but as Eric could allude to, I'm kind of I'm willing to stand on business and say some bold things sometimes. But I think folks are acting prematurely, once again, out of fear. And fear is one of the most powerful emotions because it's paralyzing. And then you try to anticipate what could happen. So a significant amount of energy is utilized within this unknown process because we're not really comfortable with being in this gray area. So I would say I find it interesting how institutions are prematurely non-federal institutions are prematurely backing away from some of this. When in terms of parsing out what's going to go through the federal courts, what's going to be approved, what isn't, and then the intricacies that come down the pipeline with that, we literally don't know. So there's a chance that all this could be fear mongering and posturing, and the federal courts say you actually can't do this, right? There also is a chance that that's not the case, and it's the opposite, and things do end up getting pushed through that really change our reality. But I would say I'm erring on the side of moving cautiously as business as usual. And that's a way that I stand in my truth and my power and my value set, especially since on the non-federal level, there really hasn't been anything that's been pushed through that directly impacts the work that we do. I don't know if that fully answered your question, Eric, but
yeah, definitely. I think the key thing that even stuck to me, right, when we think about not acting as you mentioned, Tanisha, prematurely, right? So I think even now we're starting to see that some things are like not going through, or some people may have acted too quickly in terms of changes that they made, and really understanding the legal system. I think it is bringing a lot of awareness, right? I found even myself, like looking up, like, oh, what does this executive order mean, or even what is officially challenged or not. So I think that aspect, right, of being able to understand the system, and even when we think about that state versus federal. So I think those are some solid points there. Tanisha, you touched on leadership, right? For those, which leads to my next aspect of, for those that might be within leadership or maybe are in charge of some of the initiatives. Um, we spoke on it a little bit, but how can people in these leadership positions, be an advocate for diversity, equity, inclusion, policies, in this time, or even use that power aspect to influence, inclusivity in their organizations amidst this climate.
Shay, I'll take this one first because I think you went first for the last one. Okay, I got you. I think that's a loaded question, and an important one because oftentimes folks do nothing because they don't know what to do, right? Because it seems so nebulous. Especially when your institution might have decisions that do not align with your own personal decisions, right? But if we're being honest, that was a energy or a dynamic that most people, especially folks who are of diverse backgrounds, were already dealing with in the workplace. So I'd say a few things. One is figuring out what's going on the local level. We're really blessed where we have like political advocacy groups that work with a lot of our state legislation, and they do like newsletters and send out like, hey, here's bills that are coming up, here are things that you should be thinking about, here's some of the executive order mumbo jumbo parsed out, so I'm blessed where some folks are dedicated to that work and it's alignment with their role. So within our institution, I'm able to get some additional information, and they've already cleared some of that clutter for me. And they do a fantastic job at that. So I would say finding local resources that already are doing some of this, because there's a lot of people, this is literally their expertise in their job, and they're just producing this information saying like, hey, here's what this means, here's how this impacts us, etc. And I've been finding that out truthfully just through Googling stuff, and then obviously fact checking, because just because it's on the internet or you see it on social media does not mean it's true, especially with AI and all of the craziness. I literally was watching a video and it was a seal that had a bunch of barnacles on it, and I literally thought it was real. And then I was talking to my partner, and he was like, that's AI, right? And I'm like, are you sure? I literally had an emotional reaction. I felt so bad for the seal with all the barnacles on it. So also making sure that we're fact checking our resources, but figuring out who is an expert or committed to this work within your community to help you navigate this, because I'm not going to become a legal expert overnight, and that was not a priority in my K through 12 education. I remember the song How to Pass a Bill or something by House of Rock, and that was it, to be honest. So that piece. And then I would say, if this is a value of yours, honestly holding your leaders accountable and your institution, to circle back to my point originally of like, where do y'all stand on this? Is this something that like we're willing to hold true to? And if so, getting other people at your institution, coworkers, colleagues, community members to really encourage and apply pressure to leaders to publicly think about where are their values in this work. Since you don't have to be a leader in positionality to lead ideas, movements, and to shift culture. So I think a lot of this is also going to be lighting a fire for people individually to push the agenda of equity. So to summarize, what I'd said is doing the work, doing the research, figuring out who's the expert in your community already doing this and parsing through some of this, and then questioning or asking for more information from your leadership about where they stand, and then finally finding ways that you can be an individual leader within your institution and your community to support people championing this work.
Oh man, oh man. Yeah, the heavy hitting question here. What role does leadership play? I think they play a very large role. Dare I say, the weight is very much on their shoulders to ensure that DEI efforts are maintained and or continued amidst politically changing environments. It kind of ties very similarly back to the previous question, right? Are you keeping the first things first? Were you always committed to these things? Are you just now committing or just now decommitting to these initiatives? We call them, crucial conversations at work sometimes, right? Are you leaning into your discomfort and bringing up the things that are hard to talk about? Sometimes I think that there are some leaders who lean into the discomfort and say, hey, before you hear this in the media, let's talk about it here.
Mm,
Hey, this is in the media. Let's talk about it here. And there's some who don't want to talk about it at all. And I'd say the fear, going back to that fear thinking, right, is the ones who are afraid to talk about it. The leaders who will say the things behind closed doors, but won't say them to their employee of 20 years or their employee that just started last week. I think there should be some level of consistency, dare I say even transparency, to not only for those who are non-leaders to have those conversations with upper management and leadership, but vice versa. Leadership going to, the everyday worker and asking like, how does this impact your day? How does it impact your work? And I think when there's hopefully authentic conversations, brave spaces over safe spaces, I think that maybe then we can be more honest with each other about how it's impacting us. But the less we're talking to each other, the easier it is for these shifts and polarizing topics to prevail. So it starts with just those conversations, no matter how hard they are.
yeah, no, Shay, that's a great point, and something I touched on a little bit in my previous expert insights, right? When we think about, how polarized we are, and I think, creating that space where Um, we can have those tough conversations. I think what I always try to say is leading with a place of curiosity. Even within, the DEI space, we're not always going to all agree on every aspect of everything, right? But it's like, how can we respect each other and, have that space where we can have the feel safe and having conversation and see, leading to that place of understanding. So you all said that beautifully. Um, I know I have so many questions here, but I do want to make sure I take a peek at um, any Q&A questions. So just gonna try to get to that really quick to see if there's
While you're
any.
looking at that, Eric, I
Yeah.
wanted to just add something off of Shay's piece. Is I think we also sometimes put too much weight on individual leaders while without considering the environment they have to lead in, right? Because if leaders do not have the resources to host those communications and there's executive leadership really not promoting a culture of um doing things and potentially failing because true equitable cultures allow leaders to fail forward, right? And I know that term used to bother me a little bit, like I thought it was a little cliche, but when Shay was speaking I was thinking about how there are so many leaders, even leaders that I work with my executive coaching, where they have all these ideas of things that they want to do, but then they understand that their top leadership really does not allow or promote that. So then once again, there's this culture of fear. So if we're really moving towards bringing us back to what DEI means, inclusion and that ability to truthfully show up and to show up authentically, wholly, and it being a safe space to also make mistakes or to add further information within my leadership style. I think I'm encouraging, or within my leader coaching, I'm encouraging folks to intentionally make decisions with the information that they have and being willing to add or redact information once new information comes into the picture, right? And I don't think we really promote that in several industries, but definitely not medicine, in terms of being able to concretely make a decision, disseminate that information while allowing follow-up information as the picture becomes more clear or new variables are added. So then that's where, as Shay again alluded to, the importance of transparency, right? But if you're not solid in yourself or feeling committed to being a leader and making mistakes, then you do have to wait until someone else gives you the green light that you have all the information you may need to even disseminate information, which I think paralyzes us because then team members feel like you're not doing anything as a leader, actually, when really you're doing a lot, but you're just not sharing it because you're waiting
Yeah.
for the final production or the final information to make you feel confident in your decision. Once again, wrapping back into fear and how fear is paralyzing.
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing that to light, Tanisha, right? Being able to, take those steps and, as you mentioned with the information and also that transparency piece. Um, so again, you all can, probably the next 5 minutes or so, feel free to enter into the Q&A box. We'll take some of those questions as I'm going through here. Let's see. One question that I saw is, what role does, media and social movements play in advancing diversity, equity, and inclusion during these politically challenging times?
Yeah, if I could, I'd love to kind of jump into that question. So, for those who don't know my educational background, I studied journalism in college with a minor in sociology. And there was like, oh, why don't you go work in the news? Yeah, I worked for radio for a few years, so that was fun, but not TV. But to that end, media plays a large part, and it all goes back to I think I heard Tanisha say earlier. It's about how we consume it, right? Media is shown on various platforms, even online. So we just have to be careful of the resources that we're using. If y'all remember back in the remember when your teacher used to say, well, you can't use the internet. You got to use a book. You got to cite your references like that. Like that is, I call it the essence of like information. Like information came from books at one point, only books. And if even someone said it, they're like, well, they said it. They didn't put it in a book and they don't have publishing. So it was all these things. So to that end, media plays a large factor. And I think we should always question our sources. That is just for someone who's a background in journalism, that is what journalism is about. The question, and then even sometimes questioning where you got the answer from. Like that is always what it's about. And I think at the end of the day, you have to still make a decision on if you believe what you heard or if it's true. Does it stand the test of time? Can you scientifically prove it or disprove it, right? But at the end of the day, I'd say media is a huge factor. So we should always be questioning the media that we receive, the media that we're sharing with others and our family and our children. But to that end, it can be used for good, but you just have to be careful how you use it. And I'm using polarizing talk here, but using it good or bad is subjective. All media, whether you believe it or not, there's some intent behind it, right? There's a reason why they publish this and not that. So to say that all mediums are objective, I'd say you could even question that. So that's just my take on it.
So,
No, that's super, super accurate. And I think for me, whenever I see anything, I'm thinking who wrote it, why did they write it, who funded it, what story or truth is missing, and what are they trying to get me to understand or feel from this? Even things that are in alignment with my own values. I'm trying to develop that ability to think about those 5 things when I'm consuming information. And I'd actually seen a statistic and it talked about how in a day we consume more information and more tragedy than 50 years ago we used to consume in a lifetime, right? And I think that adds to our mental state within the world and our emotional state, as well as social media has been used to bring things to light, such as we already have talked about, the reason why a lot of this movement is here, the murder of George Floyd. The uprising would not have happened if that video would have not been captured and it would have not been put on the internet, right? So it was a horrific murder, but it mobilized a nation. So truthfully, even saying that, and then the fact that we're talking about what we're talking about here today just really breaks my heart in so many different ways, but especially as a Black woman from this community. So developing I don't want to say a critical, but like an intentional and healthy level of skepticism when you're consuming anything, because money moves agendas. And I also think social media has been perfectly timed with our exhaustion and being overworked as a nation, where we're viewing headlines and not viewing full content. So we'll see catchy things that grab our eye, but since we're so exhausted, we don't have the capacity to do a deeper dive into things because there's so many things going on. So once again, that's why I said pick 3 things, because caring about everything is too much. So just like really thinking about what's in alignment with your values, and how can you use social media as a tool to help you become informed and not to exhaust you even more or have you only holding a piece of the truth.
Yeah. Well, you all just, I know we're coming close here, but I just want to say thank you for today's conversation. You all had some really great insights, and I knew this was gonna happen. We're just like talking, and the time just flew by. But it was all great conversation, and I think even as we think about some of those key takeaways here, I think as we mentioned, diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace, it affects each and every one of us, right? Whether we're talking about um, a multi-generational workplace, how we navigate difference in communication, uh, in backgrounds, our modes of learning, our ability status. So as we mentioned, this affects everyone. So we don't want to be persuaded that it doesn't. And then I think right now the value of having information or even training in this area is prevalent, right? We want to have a cohesive workplace and produce that space to have the tough conversations, as Shay mentioned. So that value is going to be very high as we navigate these polarizing times. And I think ultimately, right, we've got to stay resilient, not giving up on your efforts to create an inclusive workplace, because you want everyone to have that voice in the workplace, and you want to be an organization that attracts and retains great talent, and within the space. So as we summarize today, those are the key things. And yeah, I think Shay and Taneasha, you all really put a great input into this conversation, and as again sincerely thank you all for that. Um, Now I'm just gonna give some promo things that we typically do really quick before we log out of here. Again, here at IPD, we do offer different trainings, whether that's in the need for workshops, if you need things for board meetings, leadership retreats, and that's all on our website, the metrostateipd.org. So feel free again to reach out. And in terms of what's coming next, on April 16th, we'll be talking about mentoring across generations. So we'll be talking about navigating that multi-generational workplace and trying to demystify some of those things when we think about navigating different generations in the workplace. So again, just wanted to thank you all. And if you all want to get in contact with our panelists, if you all just want to share ways that people can get in touch with you all before we wrap up.
Sure. Uh, Everyone's welcome to reach out to me directly. I have a long government email, shay.marlowe at state.mn.us, but also reach out to me on LinkedIn as well. So you can find me on one of the few Shay Marlows on LinkedIn that's tied with state government in Minnesota. But yeah, I'll do it. Taneasha didn't drop some of my handles in the chat as well.
Awesome.
Same. Feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm trying to get better about using it because I feel like I'll go not on it and then I'll have like 30 messages and I'm like, okay, I need to start checking it like an email. So if you do not receive a response from me right away, it's not you. But please reach out over email. Super open to collaborating and seeing if there's ways that I can serve and support you individually and or your institution or business within this work, and as we persist and persevere and continue.
Awesome. Yes, and again, thank you all so much for the time today. I hope I didn't interfere too much with you all's lunch. So be sure to yeah, have a great day, and hopefully we'll see you all in April.